All right.
And Annie, before we get plugging and chugging, will I have control to click through slides as well?
I don't think so. So I'll be doing that
Okay.
for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Okay. Sorry, there's like a lot of stuff on the screen that gets in the way when I'm doing screen share that I'm not completely used to still. All right, so the presentation that we are giving today is about being a graduate student during COVID. Being a graduate student is a really tough time, in my opinion, in and of itself. And with this added extra layer of COVID, we wanted to address some ideas that we have and that you all might have in learning how to cope during this time specifically. So to start off, I'm wondering how your experience as a graduate student has changed during COVID, maybe for the better or for the worse, because I've definitely heard both.
I defended my
been
dissertation.
crazy.
Yeah, I defended my dissertation over Zoom. That was positive in that I was still able to defend and have the support that I needed to defend, but definitely not the defense that I had always pictured that I was going to have.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I live with my parents right now just to help and support, and they're older. So I changed the way I do things. I don't go a lot of places. I try to help out as much as I can. It's been a lot. And then there's school stuff as well that comes on top of it for research. So there's been a lot of different changes that I think we've all had to make because of COVID. Like I've had my first COVID-19 test that came out negative, but that was kind of weird to go through the drive-through testing. So it's been a really crazy process.
Yeah, just things we never expected to have to go through right now.
Yeah, for me, I know that I taught last semester, so that switch from in-person to online classes was really crazy. And it was a lot. It's a lot more work to do an online class than I think I had ever thought or imagined. And then just also, even though I'm normally a homebody, so I like to stay home anyways, but being in your house just 24/7, it's really hard, especially to when, you know, if you're in an apartment and trying to like create different spaces for you. So like, this is your workspace. This is your like relaxing space. This is your sleep space. It's, you know, it's difficult.
Yeah, really resonate with that space thing. I think that has been difficult. And what you said about you being a homebody typically, but this feels a little bit different. I think also just losing that choice of like, okay, I have the choice to go out and do things versus I don't really have that choice anymore, right?
Yeah.
I never knew how much I actually missed being on campus until I couldn't be there anymore. Just even walking from your car to the building or walking to the next building to get coffee or to get a snack, you know, just a lot of that movement that you take for granted.
The change
yeah,
in
I think I
little
noticed.
breaks.
Yeah, I think for me, I noticed that even though my commute was relatively short, it was about 10 minutes. That 10 minutes was really important for me in the mornings of kind of getting in the headspace of, okay, I'm going to work. These are the things I'm going to do. I need to organize, you know, kind of my task list and kind of putting together that in my head, and then having that same 10 or 15 minutes getting home to kind of, you know, detransition, you know, from work headspace to home's headspace. I don't think I realized how important that was until I didn't have that.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for sharing. I appreciate that. We'll talk more about those here in just a second. So here are some challenges I came up with. I think we pretty much covered all of these at some point or another. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I think the main thing I've taken away from 2020 is just you can't expect anything to go the way that you expect it to go. That's one lesson that I've learned. Some anxiety just about that might be related to the uncertainty or, you know, general anxiety being a grad student anyway. Like I said down below, there's a lot of different roles you're playing in your life. Like Catherine, you talked about, you know, like trying to help out at home while still doing your studies, while still being on the graduate student council or Congress. And that's a lot. Those are just three of the things that I know about you just in our very limited interaction. So there's probably even more roles that you're balancing in your life. So I think, you know, we have those roles without COVID, but during COVID, sometimes those roles become more challenging to balance. Not having access to needed materials, that can be related to research, it can be related to clinical needs. I know for us, doing assessments has been very difficult, just because we don't have access to our assessment materials that we may need. Just the general pause on the research. You all mentioned job searching earlier, so that's definitely been more challenging. I know from people in our class, most of them luckily did have things lined up or interviews secured at least before COVID started, but some people have actually ended up having their offers pulled and then having to find a new job. So that's definitely been difficult out there, as well as just the pause and like hiring in academia. So if that was somebody's path that they wanted to go down, it was already kind of a difficult path before, but now it's becoming a lot more barriers just because so few places are hiring. I think communication can be challenging because we're not seeing a lot of people like face-to-face in person right now. So we're missing a lot of those nonverbal cues that maybe we would have picked up on before. So trying to adjust to picking up more on verbal cues or chest up nonverbals, if that makes sense, is something that's definitely come up for me as well. Okay, so one of our focuses for the presentation today is on self-care. So I just want to add a little disclaimer that self-care is predominantly a Western white concept. So it may not always apply to every person in graduate school or every role they're playing or every culture. So I do want to put that disclaimer out there. And basically our goal when we say self-care is trying to help graduate students figure out ways to cope with their circumstances in life. Like how best to cope with your advisors, with the roles that you're playing in your life, with families, with your workload. And some of the things we may suggest may not work for everyone because there are some things that we can't change as graduate students. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a disclaimer there. And then this graphic I have over here on, I don't know if it's the left or right for you all, but it's my right. This is something I talk about a lot with friends and with clients, is you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself first. So if you're not refilling your own cup with water by taking care of yourself and doing things that you have to do, like sleeping, eating, hygiene kind of stuff, then you're not going to be as good at helping take care of others. So, okay. So this is kind of what we were thinking is self-care is any activity or practice that you deliberately do to take care of yourself physically and emotionally. We want it to be able to achieve a sustainable, balanced life, or as sustainable as we can as graduate students. Generally, when you take part in self-care or some sort of coping strategies, it can help build up resilience. And that's the ability to bounce back from a stressful event. So I think all of our resilience has definitely been tested the past, I don't even know how many months, 4 months, I guess. And I also want to point out, and again, this is kind of coming from a privileged white perspective. Self-care is not selfish, it's not unproductive, it's not a check mark on your to-do list. It's not always the same thing every time. So I know in some cultures, definitely like what we think of in the United States or to think of in the United States as self-care. We don't think of it as selfish, but it could be perceived in other cultures as selfish. So that's something that to keep in mind when you're thinking of self-care and trying to, you know, encourage other people to do. Is not, like I said, not everything is going to fit with every person. So I'm curious, how do you all self-care? How do you take care of yourselves? And Melissa and I can share too.
Okay, so for me, let's see, what do I do? That's a great question, because when you just sometimes do it. I think that's also part of it. You just sometimes do it. You don't always think of it as a self-care moment or just doing something that makes you happy or makes you feel good. I know for me, I get something to eat in the morning, like I start my day off like early, getting something to eat. Then I, normally just have my time of prayer. And then like I start my day off with emails. And then like I'll take a pause if possible throughout that day and like just take another pause just to relax and not think about anything. So sometimes I'll either watch a movie, like I'm a big movie buff. I love movies. Or sometimes I'll just watch the news to see what's going on, and then I'll get right back to it. But then at the end of the day, like I have my dinner with my parents and we just sit and talk, and then we'll watch a movie or a TV show together and just laugh and just have like a moment of just not thinking about anything. So I think sometimes self-care is just like mindless fun. Like not thinking about things too seriously because we normally have to do that all the time, but just to have like mindless fun of just having a fun movie on TV and just relaxing with a cup of tea and just having a good time with like a blanket or a heated blanket. Oh, that's the
Heated
best.
blankets, yes.
I love
It sounds
them.
like it's intentionally built into your day, though. That you
I try
intentionally
to.
try to create that space for it.
Sometimes it doesn't happen because some days you get tired and you just fall on your bed and just sleep.
Yes.
But
And
most
that goes
of the time
back
I try to do
to
that.
And that goes back to the idea that self-care isn't always going to look the same way every time. So some days self-care is going to be this intentional built-in kind of routine that you have. And some days it's just going to be like, all right, I just need to like lay in bed today.
Yeah. Or just sleep in a little bit longer than you normally would.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think self-care can sometimes be those things with a heated blanket and a cup of tea and kind of giving yourself some space to relax. And I think self-care can also be kicking yourself in the butt and like, I need to get this stuff done. I need to get this stuff off of my plate because it's making me worried. I just need to sit down and I need to do it. And so I think that it can be both of those things. And I think both of those things, sometimes checking things off your to-do list and chilling with a cup of tea and a heated blanket, I think those things can be equally productive sometimes.
I agree.
I think self-care is something that I know you mentioned that definitely it's more Western centric and kind of this, white idea that self-care is not bad. But I also think in academia, self-care can kind of always be put on the back burner. I know that there's always that pressure, like you should be writing. In the back of my head, I have that little voice, you should be writing, you should be writing. And so I think that it's something that it's taken me quite a few years to really try to say, okay, that's something that you can prioritize for yourself, that like you do also matter in addition to your, your career and what you're doing as far as grad school goes. And so it's, it's something that I think I was working on a lot before COVID, and then COVID happened, and a lot of the things that I had put in place for myself, I had started going to Pilates twice a week, had that routine, again, walking more on campus, doing a lot more things outside. Then COVID hit. So I think, this is definitely very important and something that, I want to try to work on a lot more. I think just little things like trying to cook yourself dinner and taking that time, or I'll go and I'll have meetings outside rather than inside. And I try to read just like a book for fun before bed. I'll try to read like a chapter before I fall asleep. So just something that I don't have to think too hard about, that is fun and it's easy and can kind of really relax my mind before bed. So yeah, there are a lot of things that, I think that are really important and something that I think we should work on a lot more.
Yeah, I really like that you brought up like that in academia, it's not really part of the culture as well. And I think that's playing again into kind of this westernized idea of, okay, like a good graduate student is always working, is always productive. And I really hope somewhere down the road, I know this isn't going to change overnight, but that there can be more flexibility of what like the graduate student looks like and what productivity can look like for a graduate student.
Absolutely. Because I think sometimes it just depends on your advisor. There are some really good advisors out there that know what it was like when they were a student, and they can sympathize and say, if I'm taking a break this week, I think you need to take a break too. I think that's really important to to keep in mind, like, the mental health of other people are just as important as
Yes.
your mental health. Especially when you work on projects together and you're in such close contact all the time. It's important to say, like, hey, I'm going to take a week of vacation, with my family at the big professor. And I think you should too, like, just letting that student know, like, it's okay to take a break. I think one of the things that I've been learning lately is it's okay to take a pause. Taking a pause is one of the best things you can ever do for yourself. And I think for a lot of people, it's very difficult. For me, it was very difficult to start to take a pause and, like, hey, we're not going to do any work. We're not going to, worry about GSC. We're not going to worry about schoolwork. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to take like a couple of days off to just not think about anything. And I think for a lot of students, they don't always have that option, which makes things really, really scary for their mental health, because not only do they have the school stuff, but they have family. And when you think of self-care, like, for family, that could be really difficult because, what they think is self-care, others might not. And then, there's a stigma around how that looks. But then also, if you've got people you're trying to take care of and you're trying to work on the side and you've got bills, like, it just piles up and up. So I think the more that we have conversations around taking these pauses, regardless of how long it is, maybe it is just 5 minutes today. Like today, we're just not going to think about anything. We're going to go in the bathroom, hide ourselves in the closet, and just take a minute to take some deep breaths and just think about our own self-being at the moment. So I think those are things really important to think about.
Catherine has been really great this summer already about trying to build in pauses for the GSC leadership this summer.
Awesome.
We designate weekends, and she just said, we're not doing anything this weekend. Don't answer emails. Don't do GSC stuff. Like, just take time for you. Yeah. So Catherine has been really, really awesome about that.
Because I feel like if I need to pause, like, if I need the pause, I feel like other people are needing the pause too. And, sometimes, it's the elephant in the room that you don't always want to talk about, like, but everybody needs it. And so even if it is just a couple of days and you just don't do anything, for me, it was everything. I took a whole Juneteenth pause. Let me tell you, that was one of the best things ever in life. Yes. And we're going to do another one in July in a couple of days for the 4th of July and like a couple of days after, just to give people a chance to say, don't worry about nothing. Have a break. Everybody else can have a break. You can have a break too.
Yes.
I love that you've enacted that, Catherine, in your leadership role, because I think that's just a sign of a really strong leader.
Yes.
Because if the leadership isn't going to set that example, then the people under you aren't going to feel comfortable probably taking that pause, like you said.
It's a top-down kind of institutional, changing the institutional culture through having that leadership and putting that culture of it's okay to take a break, it's okay to advocate for yourself, and making that okay by modeling that good behavior in a leadership position.
Yeah. So I applaud both of you for doing that. And thank you for sharing. So these are the types of self-care we'll be going over a little bit here in a second. So we have physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. And I think you all have mentioned something like out of each of these categories. So we're well on our way to identifying all of these. I'm wondering what gets in the way of self-care for you all, especially right now.
Time is the biggest problem for me. I feel like I don't have enough time in the day. So normally I like to start like my day with, breakfast and, taking time to pray and just taking time for myself. But then something always just comes up. And then like I'd love to just take some time to just do my fitness routine and, do a little workout and go on my walk, and that sort of thing. But it just has not happened because I'll always say to myself, well, this really just needs to get done, or this email needs to be answered, or I got this meeting that starts at this time. Is there enough time to do all these things, shower and get ready? Like, I'm like, well, I guess I'll just cut this out for now. And maybe at the end of the day, I'll be able to get back to it. And it's just like, it's frustrating because you never can. It's like, dang it, I thought I was going to be able to get to this little workout. Lies I told, it's not going to happen. We're just going to try again tomorrow and see what happens. But then it's like, you get in a cycle a little bit of like, oh
Yeah.
crap. Like, for example, I'm in a cycle and I haven't been doing any exercises. And it is very obvious that I need to start back up with my routine. It's like a procrastination. I think that's part of it too. Procrastinating gets in the way because you're like, oh, well, I could just push this off to later, and later doesn't happen. And then you're like, oh, well, we'll just try to get to tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just get in my own way. I'm in my own way regarding self-care, kind of how like Catherine talked about. There's just, you have so much on your plate. And even though you maybe intend to schedule in some self-care time, things come up and then you say, okay, well, maybe that needs to get done first. So you just push yourself on the back burner, but then you just kind of get in this cycle. And so I think it really is, kind of like we've already talked about, just that mindset of really recognizing and trying to remind yourself, have other people remind yourself. I have some great people that are around me that can help me remind me and just be like, Amanda, like, it's okay. Like, you can take a break, you can do this, like, you matter as well. Because even, you tell yourself all the time, but sometimes you just need to hear it from somebody else as well. And so I think that it's kind of those constant reminders and really, trying to break your own patterns. Because again, I'm right there with Catherine, procrastinating on things sometimes, or you just get in kind of that work schedule. I know I'm used to doing 12-hour days back when I was taking classes. And so, how do you just remind yourself that 12-hour, maybe not the most productive, can you take some breaks and then get just as much done in an 8-hour day if you really plan it right and really, kind of set yourself up for success rather than just trying to slog through it for 12 hours. So yeah, I think it's a lot of reworking some of the patterns in your head. So I'm probably in my own way right now.
Yeah. And the last thing we want is for you all, for self-care to become like another thing to beat yourselves up about, right? So it's about finding that balance of not beating yourself up too much about it while also finding a way to implement it in whatever way that you can in your life. So sometimes, some parts of your life, it might just be like eating 2 meals a day. Some parts of your life, it might be, okay, I just need to get my bills paid. Sometimes it might be, like Melissa said, just getting that project done. So there's different ways of self-care that we might not traditionally think of as self-care. And Amanda, I really liked your point about having like maybe an accountability person, whether that be your advisor, if you have an understanding advisor, or like maybe a cohort mate member. I don't know the right word for that. A fellow cohortee to check in with, or maybe your parents, or maybe a friend outside of your program. I think having that person to kind of keep you accountable is a great idea. For me, I think what's mainly getting in my way of self-care, so I mainly do social self-care. That's where I draw a lot of that from. And right now, that's been very difficult. Just not being able to see people in person, face-to-face, hardly at all since COVID started. And then substituting it, with doing like maybe some like dinners together over Zoom or FaceTime or something. But that not really fully satisfying that need. So I'm still trying to explore ways to feel like I'm being fulfilled in that social category. So I definitely am feeling that barrier right now. Okay, so these are some barriers to self-care. We talked a lot just now about that busy lifestyle. I mean, graduate student, it's such a unique part of your life and time of your life. Unless somebody is there like with you right now doing it, I feel like people just don't really get that. So the busy life and the time, your expectations as a graduate student that you have to get done. Sometimes there's just, like you said, not enough hours in the day to get everything done that maybe your advisor is expecting you to get done. Society's value of productivity. So again, we're living in this Western, predominantly white culture, where at least those are the things that seem to be valued and that we're told that we need to value. I know I've definitely heard like self-care is a waste of time. It's a sign of weakness. I push through it back in the day, so you should be able to push through it. I've definitely heard those things, luckily not from my main advisor. He's very understanding. But from other advisors and other supervisors over the years, I've heard those messages for sure. And then cultural value and expectation, may get into the way of what we think of, again, in the Western culture as self-care. So like you need to do self-care, but maybe it's also expected for example, I have a friend who she's like the sole caregiver for her grandmother. And her, like some people's families may feel comfortable putting, their grandmother in a nursing facility where this person's family and culture does not support that whatsoever. So yeah, she needs to be doing some self-care, but she also needs to make sure that her grandmother, is fed and clean and has everything that she needs, because she cannot do those things for herself anymore. So I think that's difficult. And then, we're all women here. There's definitely it feels like a stigma in society that we need to be taking care of others at all times, or that we need to balance all of these roles and give her 100% to all of the roles at all times too. So I feel like that can really get in the way at times. So there's, a lot of costs to avoiding self-care. There's a lot of mental health things that can happen. I feel like the biggest thing with grad students, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you all have different perspectives, but that point on burnout, just feeling exhausted, feeling like they can't do anything anymore, not even being sure if they like what they're doing anymore, can really come into play when that self-care is not fulfilled in some ways. There's physical related illnesses, ulcers, acid reflux, heartburn, hypertension. Sometimes you can develop rashes. Sometimes people develop like digestive kind of issues, like
sleep concerns,
IBS.
of not getting adequate sleep anymore.
Yeah, sleep, not getting their nutritional needs met. Relationships. I know I'm guilty of coming home after a hard day and like taking it out on my partner when I'm not taking care of myself in terms of self-care. And so that can come into play. Sometimes people isolate when they're avoiding self-care, so they just cut off social relationships completely for a while because they are so focused on getting other things done. And then the last category is overall well-being. So that can be like increased absenteeism, diminished productivity, some conflict in your team, turnover like in programs, at your job, all of that. Any questions about the costs? Okay. Melissa, I'll hand it over to you.
Alrighty. So just physiological self-care. So these are some of the ways that people neglect self-care in the physiological sense. They'll find themselves avoiding or skipping meals and snacks. Things are getting in the way. Oh, I can just work through lunch, and then working through lunch might turn into, I'm typing so much, I didn't really even get to eat my sandwich that I had sat next to my desk. So what we want to do is not avoid or not miss those meals and try to really keep an intentional focus on nourishing our bodies. So we also want to try to create structure around sleep. So sometimes we can find ourselves, okay, we have this deadline coming up. I'm going to stay up really, really late. I need to hammer this out. And then, you find yourself super exhausted the next day. Maybe you find yourself taking a nap in the middle of the day and you can't fall asleep when you're trying to go to bed that next night, and it kind of feeds into itself. So what we really want to try to do is create structure with the sleep. So having a bedtime, give or take, usually within an hour and a half hour of going to bed the same time every night, and usually trying to wake up at about the same time every day. And that really helps facilitate the restful and restorative sleep that we need, that gives our brain time to rest and gives our bodies time to heal. It also helps consolidate memory. So the better sleep we're getting, the more we're going to be able to remember from what we did the day before. So that can also help in creating our most productive brains that we can have the next day. So we want to make movement a priority. I think we've talked about, taking 5 minutes to stand up, stretch, walk around. I think, Catherine, you mentioned going to the closet and sit for a minute and deep breathe, or just, walk around. I think breathing is an important part of physical movement.
Amanda, you mentioned that that's something I feel like you feel like you're maybe missing a bit more since COVID started, because you're not getting up, going to grab a coffee in the next building, going to talk to someone across the room.
Yeah, I've noted my fitness classes. I was really big. Amanda, you said Pilates. I think I was really big into yoga before this had started. And so, doing a YouTube video of yoga feels better than nothing, but it's not that same kind of, I guess, engagement that I feel when I go to a yoga class. But it is better than nothing. We're not going for perfection here. We're going for something is better than nothing. So we want to avoid substance use and be mindful of over-caffeinating. I'm kind of putting those together there because I think, forget that caffeine technically is a substance. I know I've got this next to my desk pretty much at all times. It's pretty much attached to my hand. And I don't know if this is just a personal experience, but have you ever felt like, okay, I'm over-caffeinated, my heart is beating, I'm no more awake, my heart's pounding and I'm more anxious. That's kind of
I've been there.
Yep. Like you can hear your heartbeat in your ears. It's like, oh, overdid it this time. So what we want to avoid is that over caffeinating, because that really can increase our anxiety and our fidgetiness, restlessness, all of those types of things that make it hard to sit down and be productive and feel like we are accomplishing those things.
And it disrupts your sleep cycle too.
Yes, it does. It does. And avoiding substance use. So it feels a little bit different when you had a rough day, you want to get home, you want to sit down with a glass of wine, and that's okay to do occasionally, but when that becomes your only kind of coping skill or your go-to kind of coping skill to manage some of the negative feelings of a bad day, we just want to monitor ourselves for those things. And then also take breaks. We've discussed that quite a bit on, having a culture and facilitating a culture that allows people to take breaks and to ask for breaks and to advocate for yourself when you feel like you need one. So mental and spiritual self-care, get some structure, organize, and prioritize. So it can be really easy to get busy and to forget to do some of that mental and spiritual self-care because it might not be as obvious as some of the physiological self-care. Okay, I ate, I stood up, I did my YouTube yoga video, I did whatever I needed to do. That is a little bit more tangible than maybe making sure you're taking time in the day to practice your meditation or spend some time in prayer. Those things can kind of fall through the cracks sometimes if we're not intentionally putting together the structure and prioritizing doing those things. Another way that we can kind of manage some of that is break down big projects into smaller tasks so it looks less overwhelming. So if you're sitting and staring at this huge mountain of a project that needs to get done, humans are really bad at being uncomfortable, and looking at that massive project can feel really uncomfortable. So we're going to avoid it. We're going to start doing other things. We're going to maybe clean our house to avoid answering that email about that big project. We're going to do anything except that big thing. So finding ways to break it down into smaller chunks. So maybe if I don't have to, I'm working on this huge paper and I need to find, 10 sources and create this annotated, people still annotated bibliographies, whatever, some big project that you have to do, maybe breaking it down into, okay, I'm going to find 1 or 2 sources today. I'm just going to do part of this project. I'm going to chunk this up so it feels a little bit more manageable, so we're less likely to avoid it then. Find ways to soothe yourself, thinking of calm things, visualizing your happy place, so to speak, and create a worry-free zone.
I like taking really like hot showers.
Yes, thank you.
Like that's like my example. I know not everybody may have access to that. So another example that I enjoy too is like maybe like having a candle, or if your place of living doesn't allow candles, because I have lived in those before, like the little warmer melter thing. I don't know the technical term for them. But
wax cube kind of situation.
Yeah, the wax cubes that you put in the dish and it gets hot and melts them, but there's no flame, so it's safer than candles technically. Those I find really soothing, or just listening, like going onto YouTube, finding like a mindfulness exercise, or Melissa, you're gonna say this in a second, like a compassion mindfulness exercise could be really useful as well. And what we mean by the worry-free zone, I think, is kind of what you were speaking to earlier, Amanda, of trying to find like a space that's like not related to grad school work, grad school stuff, where you can like go and be away from that. And that is definitely a challenge right now with COVID. So I hear you all on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of creating those boundaries and that designation of this is the space. And even if it's okay, I work on the couch, but not in the chair. The chair, this is my chill chair. This is where I don't answer emails. And so even doing something as small as that, just to help kind of create that space and create that designated worry-free area. So practicing acceptance and self-compassion, I think, Catherine, you hit on this great when you were saying, you know, I lied to myself and said I was going to do this workout tonight, and then that didn't happen, and then saying, you know what, that's okay, I can try again tomorrow. I think that's an excellent example of practicing compassion for yourself, because it's hard to exist right now. And being mean to ourselves isn't going to motivate us to go work out any more so than, you know what, it's okay. I'm going to be nice to myself. And in fact, having that compassion and saying it's okay, I can try again tomorrow, research says is more motivating than being mean to ourselves. So it can feel a little bit counterproductive. And for long-term sustainable self-care, that compassion is what's going to be the key there. So allow yourself to make mistakes. That feeds kind of perfectly into it. We're not perfect. We're not going to be perfect every day. And so if self-care falls through the crack, practice that compassion and say, hey, you know what? I need to get back on track. That's okay, self. We're going to try again tomorrow. And then working for some of that. Some is better than nothing. We're not trying to be perfect. Find a way to journal or express yourself and be creative. Have an outlet for that. Some people prefer art. Some people prefer writing. Even just typing your thoughts out on a computer can kind of help create a holding space for some of those thoughts. Spiritually connect, find ways to connect with your spirituality, with your faith, or with your religion, if that feels important to you, and find ways to kind of maybe connect with other people in the community in a safe way through Zoom, or again, through maybe an online church service, if that's something that your house of worship is doing. And also find time to laugh. You know, if that means spending way too much time on TikTok or New Vine, whatever the kids are doing these days, or watching funny movies that don't have to, you don't have to think too much. You're allowed to just kind of take some time to laugh.
All right. And we have about 10 minutes left, Melissa. So just keeping track of the time. We don't want to hold everybody up. Okay. So we may skip over some things, but we'll let you all know.
Yeah, so it's just a social self-care. I'll kind of buzz through those. Oops. Essentially with that, no.
My bad.
Essentially
Sorry.
with that, no, you're fine. Essentially what that boils down to is figuring out how and what type of relationships give you energy and kind of help you feel restored, and how to connect with those relationships. So connect with your social supports through share and through play. So giving somebody a phone call, setting up a Zoom dinner date, anything particularly like that. Do something nice for somebody else. That's kind of one of those things we tell kids to do that, you know, random acts of kindness, but really they are very helpful in kind of helping us create that sense of hope in our world and connecting with other people. Set boundaries and say no. That's a hard one. That one's super, super hard. I think particularly for grad students as well, because there's that element of pressure. If somebody above you, your advisor or somebody higher up in your department asks you to do something, it can feel really hard to say no. But it is important to create that space for yourself so you have time to do these self-care activities and set that boundary.
And maybe even like approaching it with an advisor as, oh, could we like come to like a middle ground here somewhere? I know some advisors still like aren't going to be willing to do that. But just maybe with some that are more flexible, trying to find out like, okay, like you want me to do this. Could the deadline be next week versus this week? That sort of thing. Another great just phrase to keep in your back pocket is, I'd be happy to do that. What would you like me to deprioritize to make that happen? That's just a great one where you're being, you know, transparent, that you're being cooperative, you're saying yes to the project, and you're conveying that something else is going to have to get shifted to the back burner in order for you to say yes to that project. That's just a good kind of phrase to keep in your back pocket for those kinds of times.
when maybe saying no doesn't feel like it's an option. Asking for help and being unapologetic for when you need help. If you take on a project and it ends up being a little bit more work intensive than you thought, feeling like you can go and say, hey, I might need a little bit of extra support on this is really going to help you be able to be successful with that project. And then also asking for what you need from important others. So that kind of dovetails into that, but it can feel a little bit different asking a friend, hey, can I give you a call? I really need some support right now, versus, hey, advisor, I'm going to need some extra time, or I'm going to need some support, or I'm going to need, whatever you might need for your advisor to get that done.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Don't know why it's not going. Okay, there we go. So we're going to skip over this just because we don't have time left to do it. But I encourage you all to come up with a self-care plan. And you all, it sounds like you all kind of are already doing this. But just come up with 2 strategies that you can do regularly or switch out. Identify barriers, identify what assistance you might need, and how often you'll be practicing it, and who can hold me accountable. So we're going to skip over this, but just so you all
I do want to
have
just pause and say it really feels like you can think through this in your head, and you probably definitely can. And it's very powerful to sit down and write these things out. I feel like sometimes if it's just in our head, we can let go of it a little bit easier, or it can get overlooked a little bit easier. But really taking the time to intentionally write these things out makes it feel like a little bit more of a commitment and a little bit more real. So I definitely would encourage everybody to sit and write these things down and actually take the time to think through those things. So just tips to deal with this in light of COVID is to continue staying connected with your friends and cohort. It can feel a lot more difficult since you're not on campus, you're not running into people in line at Starbucks, you're not running into people in your department, or having people drop by your office. So really to take time to intentionally stay connected with those people. And again, say this all the time, is to set boundaries where if somebody's trying to connect with you and you don't have the emotional space, it's also okay to say, hey, maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow. And so kind of balancing that staying connected with people with those boundaries that you need to have for yourself. Limit new exposure to COVID. So plan really intentionally when you need to go to a grocery store. And so it might not be running to the grocery store once a week when you run out of 2 or 3 things, but it might be waiting every 10 days or so and really creating a substantial list before you go out. Stay informed about what's going on with COVID, but also know it's okay to unplug sometimes. It's okay to take a step back. It's important to stay informed, but it's also 100% okay to limit social media, limit your news stories that you're reading about COVID, because I don't think humans were designed to be taking in all of this information constantly, all at the same time. And so knowing where that balance is for yourself of remaining informed, but stepping back for your own mental health. Set a routine that works for you. Some people prefer to get a lot of work done in the morning and then coast kind of at the end of the day. Some people prefer to work up and get a lot of stuff done at the end of the day. So figuring out what works for you and then trying to stick to it. Ask for help when needed. I kind of touched on that in the previous slide. And be kind to yourself, especially regarding motivation. It's really hard to be as productive and as, I guess, quality productive, have that same productive quality that we did before all of this happened, because we're also neurologically and psychologically processing so much more than we were in the before times. The after times, we're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with taking care of our family, we're worried about, is our family staying safe? Are we staying safe? And so be kind to yourself. If you usually can get 10 things done on your to-do list and you're only managing 5, maybe start to readjusting some of those expectations of yourself in a way of practicing that self-compassion. And then deciding how much risk you feel comfortable taking. So the question that a lot of people I've found asking is it safe to do this? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is probably no. We don't really know what's safe to do anything. We don't know a whole lot right now. And so deciding, instead of asking it, is this safe? Is this an amount of risk that I feel comfortable taking right now? And so things that you ask yourself is, who am I going to be around? Who do I have to care for? Who might I expose? What risk factors do I have? And that can kind of help you formulate the answer to that question. Is this a risk I feel comfortable taking?
Okay, and I know you all are going to have to get going because you have your other meeting. So I'm not sure if you want to stay on for the last few slides and be a little late, or if you would, if we can just, finish up the recording and you all can look at it later, whatever you all prefer.
It kind of, I mean, if Amanda, if you want to head out really quick, and then I'll stay to hear the last bit of the slides, I think that might work. Or if Amanda, if you want to send them an email, I don't know, which one do you think is the best option?
To say, I don't mind to stay if you want to greet our new.
Okay, I'll go. No problem. But this was really impactful. I think this is exactly what we need to keep moving us forward, especially with our mental health, and the things and tips and tools that you all gave were so impactful. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate it.
And
Absolutely.
any feedback you have for us, feel free to send us an email, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Yeah.
You too. All right.
All right. So these are some of the things that people have endorsed saying they feel when they've been on Zoom for a while, or just when they've been interacting with Zoom. Is that there's more information to process. There's an awareness of being watched, and not really familiar with Zoom conversations versus in-person conversations. So as humans, we kind of get used to a conversational rhythm of gaps and pauses and inflection and those types of things, and in-person conversation that might not translate to Zoom. So is this split-second gap somebody thinking of what to say, or is my computer lagging? If we both start speaking at the same time, it's just kind of those Zoom conversation things that there's not really a social protocol for yet. And so it makes some of those interactions that we have over Zoom feel a little bit more exhausting because we don't know the script for those things, because there really isn't one. And so with the quarantine, the sense of immediacy has started to fade. So we've kind of adapted a little bit to news cycle of talking about COVID. And so some of that immediate urgency can fade. And as that starts to fade, we might start taking a few more risks than we would have maybe at the beginning of April when all of this started. So yeah, like I said, our brain has adjusted to some of that ongoing threat. We've habituated to the level of anxiety that we feel about it. And so we can kind of feel a little bit numb sometimes as well too, because we've been swimming in this anxiety soup for so long. We physiologically and psychologically and emotionally can't feel that panicky and activated all the time. So we kind of habituated and feel a little bit of numbness. And so one of the ways we combat that is through self-care that we've discussed above. And so that's kind of how we can keep ourselves a little bit regulated so we can react to things in an appropriate way. So social justice and advocating during COVID, we really want to take the time to educate ourselves. So there are more things you can do than just protest. There are petitions that are being signed. There are donations that are going around, and if you don't have the money to donate, even just taking time to read things about the issues and educate yourself about what some of these protests or social justice issues are about. You can also facilitate difficult conversations with friends and family to kind of keep some of those social justice things on your radar if you don't feel comfortable going outside and protesting in light of COVID. So acknowledging privilege, many of our identities are intersecting. Folks may be privileged in some identities and oppressed in others. And so acknowledging our privilege in one area is important to do. So simply because I am a woman, I am also a white woman. And so acknowledging my whiteness in the room is very important right now, and acknowledging my womanness, femaleness, however you would prefer to describe that, in other areas might be important. But for right now, my whiteness is the one that I need to address and to educate myself on. Challenge yourself to have difficult conversations, and share resources and information on social media. If we can kind of feel like, okay, I clicked the share button, but what did that really do? And that can really kickstart a lot of conversations with friends and family and others that you can have. And it also continues to spread awareness of the situation and of the issues, so it doesn't kind of continue to fall into that, I guess, media cycle, though this isn't the next big thing anymore. Donate money and supplies if you feel you're in a financial situation where you can do that. And if you do feel comfortable attending a protest and you would like to do that, wearing a mask if possible, bring water and milk or sunscreen, phone, portable charger, all those types of supplies that are important during a protest. And that water and milk, typically, especially the milk, that's used to neutralize tear gas. And so that's why that milk is on there. Wear glasses versus contacts. Again, that's if there's any tear gas or other kind of gaseous agents or anything like that that are used, they can really be harmful with contacts in. So if you do have glasses, wear those instead of the contacts. Write important numbers, emergency contact, and legal representation on your body. So in case you get your phone confiscated, lose your phone dies, any of those type of things, that you still have access to those numbers.
And I also want to point out, I'm not sure how it is in Fayette County or other counties, but I know in Jefferson County, you can only contact out of jail, the county jail, you can only contact people with 502 numbers. So I'm not sure if like in Fayette County, you could only contact people with 859 numbers or not. I'm not sure how that works, but all I know is that it does not allow you to put in an area code in Jefferson County.
I don't know how I know how I feel about that, but that makes me feel icky. One thing you also want to do is turn off cell phone location services so your data cannot be tracked. So keeping your phone on airplane mode, so if anything were to happen, they wouldn't be able to access where you've been through your cell phone records. Turn off cell phone facial recognition unlock, so your phone must be unlocked with a password. And so if police are wanting to unlock your phone or trying to get you to unlock your phone, if they just hold it up and its face unlocks it, that counts as consent to unlock. So definitely make sure that you have to input a password to do so. So here's some resources on campus. In Frazee Hall, the Counseling Center, we have individual therapy, group therapy, and that goes for both grad students and undergraduates. We also have Let's Talk, which is more solution-focused, short-term consultation-based counseling, I guess would be an appropriate word for it.
And it's drop-in too, so you don't have to schedule an appointment. You just show up at the times, and those are listed on our website.
Yes. So that's more of like, hey, I'm really freaking out about this particular interaction that I had. I'm really needing some tips on how to deal with this particular single situation, rather than more ongoing, hey, I've been dealing with anxiety for a while. We also have graduate student support groups, and that's non-therapeutic. It really is, you go in there, meet with other graduate students and find support with each other, which I think has been really, really powerful. And those have been really historically well attended at Frazee. We have online drop-in groups as well, Relax, Relate, Release, which is specifically for students of color. And then we also have a meditation hour. We do have also a graduate student USO group. So that is more a specifically therapeutic group for graduate students. Graduate Student Congress is also a resource, as you all are aware of. And the
You all know that one.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to stop sharing because that's the end of our presentation.